Myanmar holds a quiet, devastating title. It is the world's second-largest producer of opium. Only Afghanistan grows more. For decades, this nation, wrapped in jungle and mountain, has been a central hub in the global drug trade. The scale of this operation is staggering. A vast, hidden industry powering economies and fueling addiction far beyond its borders. In the decade leading up to 2016, the amount of land dedicated to these crimson-tipped flowers more than doubled. It is a quiet expansion, an agricultural boom that brings with it a tide of human suffering, both for those who grow it and those who consume its final deadly product. This isn't just about drugs, it's about a country caught in a cycle of poverty and violence. The heart of this illicit agriculture beats strongest in the remote highlands, particularly in Shan State. Here, on the rugged hillsides, nearly 600 square kilometers of land are painted with the delicate Sitpurpulbabensimbas, Wanabodamberboden Komber Dabispisendas, Sitprukdiprodusem, deceptive beauty of the opium poppy. This is not the work of a few rogue actors or clandestine cartels operating entirely in the shadows. An estimated 200,000 households are directly involved in this cultivation. For these families, the poppy is not a symbol of criminality, but a lifeline. It is a crop that thrives where others fail, a source of income in a land where legitimate opportunities are scarce, and hardship is a constant companion. The story of Myanmar's heroin trade begins here, in the soil, with the people whose hands tend these fields. This explosion in cultivation is not a new phenomenon but the latest chapter in a long and complex history. The Golden Triangle, the infamous border region where Myanmar, Laos and Thailand meet, has been synonymous with opium for generations. For years the world looked away, or its efforts were piecemeal and ineffective. Now, as the production soars, the consequences are becoming impossible to ignore. The raw opium harvested from these fields is the primary ingredient for heroin, a drug that carves a path of destruction across the globe. Understanding Myanmar's role is to understand a critical source point for a worldwide crisis, a crisis that begins with a simple flower blooming in the Southeast Asian sun. The sheer volume of production speaks to a system that is deeply entrenched and resilient. It has weathered political changes, military crackdowns, and international pressure. The poppy fields are a symptom of a much deeper malaise within the country, a web of poverty, ethnic conflict, and systemic corruption that has allowed the trade to flourish. To see only the drug is to miss the point. To truly grasp the situation, we must look at the people caught in its web. We must understand the economic desperation that drives a farmer to plant poppies and the political instability that allows a warlord to profit from their harvest. This is not just a story about heroin, it is a story about Myanmar itself. For the countless farmers tending the poppy fields in the mountains of Shan State, this work is not a path to riches, it is a desperate act of survival. A farmer named Nang Kam Hersey put it simply, growing poppies is the only way to keep her family from going hungry. In these remote regions, economic alternatives are virtually non-existent. The land is often too rugged for other cash crops, and the infrastructure needed to get legal produce to market is crumbling or absent. The poppy, however, is a reliable earner. Traders come directly to the villages to buy the raw opium, providing a guaranteed income in a world of profound uncertainty. It is a choice born not of greed, but of necessity. The financial reality for these farmers is stark and sobering. The average worker involved in poppy cultivation earns less than $1,000 a year from this back-breaking labor. This is a pittance, barely enough to provide food, shelter, and basic necessities for their families. They are the first and most exploited link in a multi-billion-dollar global supply chain. The vast profits are made much further down the line, by the traffickers, the processors, and the international distributors. The farmers remain trapped in a cycle of poverty, growing a crop that will make others wealthy while they themselves live on the edge of destitution, their lives defined by the rhythm of the harvest. This economic desperation is the engine of the entire trade. Without the willing labor of hundreds of thousands of impoverished farmers, the heroin industry would collapse. They are not drug lords, they are agricultural laborers caught in an impossible situation. When faced with the choice between an illicit crop that feeds their children and a legal alternative that might not, the decision becomes tragically simple. The moral complexities of the global war on drugs fade away when your primary concern is the next meal. the poppy offers a certainty that nothing else can, a fragile shield against the constant threat of starvation and absolute poverty that haunts these isolated communities. The government's failure to provide basic services and economic development in these ethnic minority areas has created a vacuum that the drug trade has eagerly filled. For generations, these communities have been neglected, left to fend for themselves amidst conflict and instability. The poppy economy has become a de facto social safety net, a provider of last resort. It is a system that perpetuates itself. The lack of development forces people into the drug trade, and the drug trade in turn fuels the conflict and corruption that prevents any meaningful development from ever taking place. For the farmers on the ground, it is a prison with no visible walls. The opium trade in Myanmar is not just an economic issue. It is the lifeblood of a conflict that has raged for over 6 decades. The immense profits generated from the heroin trade have financed a seemingly endless civil war between various ethnic armies and the Central Burmese military. Groups like the Shan State Army have historically relied on taxing the drug trade to fund their fight for autonomy, purchasing weapons, supplies, and paying their soldiers. In this brutal equation, the poppy fields become a strategic asset, a source of revenue that allows the insurgency to continue, creating a vicious cycle where drugs fuel war, and war protects the drug trade. Corruption is the grease that keeps the wheels of this illicit machine turning. It is a widely held belief that all sides in Myanmar's long-running conflicts have, at some point, dipped their hands into the river of drug money. This includes not only the ethnic armed groups, but also powerful elements within the Burmese military and the former ruling regime. Officials are paid to look the other way as convoys of raw opium or processed heroin move through their territory. Checkpoints are waved through, and investigations are quietly shut down. This systemic corruption rots the state from within, making any genuine effort to combat the drug trade nearly impossible. The very people tasked with upholding the law are often complicit in breaking it. The conflict itself creates the perfect conditions for opium cultivation to thrive. The constant instability and lack of government control in many parts of Shan and Kachin states mean that lawlessness is the norm. In these contested territories, armed groups, rather than the state, are the real authority. They can offer protection to poppy farmers in exchange for a share of the profits, creating a symbiotic relationship. This breakdown of the rule of law means that there is no one to stop the cultivation, processing, and trafficking of narcotics. The war-torn landscape becomes a safe haven for an industry that could not exist in a stable, well-governed state. This nexus of drugs, conflict, and corruption creates a formidable barrier to peace. As long as the war economy provides a lucrative income for powerful actors on all sides, there is little incentive to lay down arms and pursue a genuine political solution. Peace would bring stability, governance, and the rule of law, all of which are direct threats to the profitability of the heroin trade. Therefore, the drug money actively works against peace efforts, perpetuating the violence that has torn the country apart for generations. The poppies blooming on the hillsides are not just the source of a drug, they are the seeds of perpetual conflict and institutional decay. Once the raw opium is harvested from the poppy fields by the farmers, its long journey to the veins of users across the world begins. The first step is collection. A network of traders and middlemen, often with connections to armed groups, travels through the remote mountain villages to buy the sticky, dark resin. These traders consolidate the harvest, gathering large quantities before the next stage. The opium is then transported down from the highlands, a perilous journey through rugged terrain and a patchwork of military and militia checkpoints. Sometimes human mules are used, individuals who carry the drugs on their person, risking their freedom and their lives for a small payment. The next destination is a clandestine laboratory, often located in the lawless border regions near China or Thailand. Here, in hidden jungle refineries, the raw opium undergoes a chemical transformation. It is processed and refined into heroin, a far more potent and profitable substance. These labs are crude but effective, churning out vast quantities of the drug. The proximity to the borders is strategic, allowing the finished product to be quickly moved out of Myanmar and into the international trafficking stream. The entire process is shrouded in secrecy and protected by the corruption and conflict that define these areas, making them incredibly difficult for law enforcement to penetrate. From these border labs, the heroin flows out into the world through a number of well-established trafficking routes. The primary artery runs north and east through China's Yunnan province. From there, it is distributed across China and shipped to markets around the globe, including North America and Europe. Another significant route leads south, through the porous border into Thailand, a long-standing hub for drug trafficking in Southeast Asia. Once in Thailand, the heroin can be moved through its international airports and seaports, disguised in commercial cargo or carried by couriers, destined for users thousands of miles away. These routes are the veins of the Golden Triangle, pumping its poison to the rest of the world. The efficiency of these trafficking networks is a testament to their organization and the level of corruption that facilitates their existence. They are sophisticated operations, capable of moving tons of product across multiple international borders with a high rate of success. They adapt to law enforcement pressure, shifting routes and methods as needed. For every shipment that is intercepted, many more get through. This constant, steady flow of heroin from the mountains of Myanmar ensures that street-level markets in cities from Sydney to Vancouver remain supplied, feeding a global addiction that begins with a single flower in a distant, war-torn land. For many people in Australia, the heroin on their streets is something they might, associate with the poppy fields of Afghanistan, a place that's constantly in the news. But this is a profound misunderstanding. The reality is actually far closer to home. An estimated 80% of all the heroin seized by Australian authorities can be traced back, not to the Middle East, but to the clandestine labs and poppy fields of Myanmar. This Southeast Asian nation is the primary supplier for Australia's heroin market, a fact that, honestly, is not widely known or understood by the public. The connection is direct, powerful, and has devastating consequences for Australian communities. This specific trafficking pipeline really highlights the global reach of Myanmar's drug trade. The heroin that begins its journey in the hills of Shan State finds its final, and most profitable market on the other side of the equator. The journey is long and complex, likely involving transshipment through multiple countries in Southeast Asia before it is smuggled into Australia by sea or by air. The high price that heroin commands on Australian streets makes it a particularly attractive destination for traffickers. The immense profits justify the risks involved in smuggling the drug across such a great distance and past Australia's stringent border controls. The social cost of this trade in Australia is immense. It fuels crime, strains healthcare systems, and sadly, tears families apart. Every bag of heroin sold in a Melbourne laneway or a Sydney suburb is the endpoint of that long supply chain starting in Myanmar. The profits line the pockets of international criminal syndicates, while the human cost is paid by addicts, their families, and the wider community. The violence and instability in Myanmar are not distant, abstract problems. They are directly connected to the overdose deaths and drug-related crime occurring in Australian cities. The unseen thread connects a farmer's poverty in Shan State to a paramedic's call in Perth. Understanding this connection is critical for developing effective policies, both at home and abroad. Simply focusing on domestic law enforcement and street-level dealers in Australia is like trying to mop up a flood while ignoring the burst pipe. The source of the problem lies thousands of miles away, in the political and economic conditions that allow Myanmar's opium economy to thrive. Addressing the heroin problem in Australia requires a broader perspective, one that acknowledges the role of Myanmar as the primary supplier and supports international efforts to bring peace, stability, and economic alternatives to the people caught in the poppy trade. Section 6. A plague on the homeland. While much of Myanmar's heroin is destined for export, a tragically large portion never leaves the country. It is consumed locally, creating a devastating addiction epidemic that is tearing through the very communities where the poppies are grown. In the small towns of northern Shan and Kachin states, the supply of heroin is cheap, pure, and terrifyingly abundant. Places like Nampatka have been hollowed out by the drug. The proximity to the source means that a dose of heroin can be bought for just a few dollars, making it accessible even to the very poor. This easy availability has turned a tool of economic survival into an instrument of communal self-destruction. The scale of the local addiction crisis is difficult to comprehend. A local pastor in the town of Nampatka provided a horrifying glimpse into the toll. He personally buried 336 drug users from his own congregation, a staggering number for one small community. He estimated that in his town, 2 or 3 out of every 5 men are now using heroin. This is not just a problem, it is a plague that is consuming a generation. Young men, who should be the future of their communities, are lost to the drug, unable to work, support their families, or contribute to society. They become ghosts in their own villages, their lives revolving around the next fix. This epidemic is a cruel irony. The crop that was meant to provide an income to keep families from starving is now directly responsible for destroying them from within. The money earned from selling the raw opium is often spent on the processed heroin that flows back into the villages. It creates a closed loop of despair, where the profits from the illicit trade are immediately consumed by the addiction it fuels. The social fabric of these communities is unraveling. The traditional structures and values that have held these societies together for centuries are collapsing under the weight of widespread heroin use, leaving behind a legacy of trauma and loss. The government's response to this internal crisis has been tragically inadequate. There is little to no state support for drug addiction services in these remote areas. There are no government-funded rehabilitation centers, no methadone programs, and no public health campaigns to warn of the dangers. The communities are left to fend for themselves. The burden of care falls on families and local religious institutions, which lack the resources and expertise to deal with such a profound public health emergency. The state that is complicit in allowing the trade to flourish is absent when it comes to cleaning up the human wreckage it leaves behind. Section 7. Shattered families, broken communities. The heroin epidemic sweeping through Myanmar's north leaves a trail of shattered families in its wake. The personal stories are heartbreaking and speak to a depth of suffering that statistics can never fully capture. Consider the story of Da Lee, a 68-year-old woman who has endured the ultimate parental nightmare not once, but twice. She lost 2 of her sons to heroin addiction. Her story is not unique. Across Shan and Kachin states, mothers, fathers, and wives are watching their loved ones waste away, powerless to stop the drug's relentless pull. The epidemic robs families of their sons, their husbands, and their fathers, leaving behind a void of grief and economic hardship. In the absence of any government help, the desperate task of trying to save the addicted falls to local communities, often led by churches and monasteries. The rehabilitation facilities they run are rudimentary at best. They operate with minimal resources, relying on goodwill and donations to keep their doors open. The methods are often basic and brutal, centered on forcing addicts to go cold turkey in grim locked rooms. There is little medical supervision or psychological counseling. These centers are born of desperation, a last-ditch effort by communities to fight back against the plague that is consuming them, using the only tools they have: prayer, confinement, and hope. The social impact extends far beyond the individual user and their immediate family. The widespread addiction crisis destabilizes entire communities. It fuels petty crime as users steal to support their habit. It erodes trust between neighbors and destroys the local economy as the workforce is incapacitated. In some areas, frustration with the government's inaction and the devastating impact of the drugs has boiled over into direct action. Vigilante groups have formed, taking the law into their own hands. These groups march into the mountains to destroy poppy fields and have been known to banish known drug dealers from their villages, a sign of a society at its breaking point. This grassroots vigilantism reveals the profound sense of abandonment felt by these communities. They see the drug trade flourishing with the complicity of corrupt officials and armed groups, and they see their children dying in the streets. Their actions, while controversial, are a cry for help, a demand for order and justice in a lawless land. They are fighting a war on 2 fronts, against the poppy fields in the hills and against the heroin needles in their own homes. The struggle of these communities is a testament to their resilience, but it also underscores the complete failure of the state to protect its own citizens from the predictable consequences of the drug trade it allows to prosper. Section 8. Sowing seeds of a different future. Amidst the despair, there are glimmers of hope. International organizations and local communities are actively searching for a way out of the poppy economy. The United Nations has been at the forefront of these efforts, promoting crop substitution programs designed to give farmers a viable, legal alternative to opium. The logic is simple. If farmers have a different way to earn a stable income and feed their families, they will no longer need to grow poppies. The challenge, however, lies in finding a crop that can compete with the unique advantages of opium: high demand, non-perishability, and a guaranteed market that comes directly to the farm gate. Early attempts at crop substitution met with limited success. The UN and other agencies encouraged farmers to plant crops like rubber, sesame, and various citrus fruits. However, these initiatives often failed. The new crops were sometimes ill-suited to the local climate and soil, or they required infrastructure like roads and refrigeration that simply did not exist. Farmers who made the switch often found themselves unable to get their produce to market, leaving them with a worthless harvest and no income. These failures bred skepticism and reinforced the perception that the poppy was the only reliable choice for survival in the highlands of Shan State. Learning from these past mistakes, the United Nations has shifted its focus to a new potential alternative: coffee. The highlands of Shan State have a climate and altitude that are ideal for growing high-quality Arabica beans, a product with significant global demand. Unlike citrus, coffee beans are less perishable and easier to transport. As of 2016, the program showed promising early signs, with around 800 opium farming families signing up to make the switch. For these families, the coffee program represents more than just a new crop. It represents a chance to escape the violence, corruption, and social decay of the illicit drug trade. For villagers like Panu, in the community of Pang Liam, the move to coffee is a tangible symbol of hope for a better future. He and others in his village who have joined the program dream of a day when they can earn a dignified living without being tied to the heroin industry. They hope for a stable income that will allow them to send their children to school and live without the constant fear associated with the drug trade. The success of these coffee-growing initiatives is fragile and depends on continued international support and market access. But each coffee plant that takes root in a former poppy field is a small victory, a seed of a different, more peaceful future for Myanmar. Section 9. The Fragile Dawn of Hope. The story of Myanmar's heroin trade is one of deep-seated and interconnected crises. It is a story of poverty forcing farmers into a devil's bargain, of a decades-long civil war financed by drug money, and of systemic corruption that paralyzes the state. It is a story of addiction that devastates communities both at home and across the world, from the villages of Kachin State to the suburbs of Australia. For years, this complex web of problems seemed intractable, a permanent feature of the landscape. The political transition away from direct military rule that began around 2016, however, brought a fragile sense of possibility and a hope for meaningful change. This political shift, combined with tentative ceasefires in some of the conflict zones, created a potential opening. There was hope that a new, more democratic government would have the will and the legitimacy to finally tackle the root causes of the drug trade. The dream was that peace could lead to development, and development could provide real alternatives to the poppy economy. A stable and unified country could extend the rule of law into the border regions, dismantle the trafficking networks, and invest in the health and well-being of its own people. This was the hope that breaking the cycle of conflict would also break the cycle of addiction. However, the path forward is fraught with immense challenges. The powerful vested interests that profit from the drug trade will not disappear overnight. Warlords, corrupt officials, and international crime syndicates have a strong incentive to maintain the status quo of instability and lawlessness. Furthermore, building a new economy based on legal crops like coffee takes time, investment, and sustained commitment. It requires building roads, securing markets, and, most importantly, winning the trust of farmers who have been let down many times before. The roots of the poppy economy are deep, and they cannot be pulled out easily or quickly. Today, on January 19, 2026, the situation remains incredibly complex and fragile. The hopes of a decade ago have faced harsh realities, yet the struggle for a different future continues. It continues in the work of the UN official helping a farmer plant a coffee tree. It continues in the quiet courage of a local pastor running a makeshift rehab center. It continues in the determination of a mother like Daw Lee, who, despite her immense loss, still holds on to hope for her remaining family and community. The future of Myanmar is not yet written. The choice remains between the shadows of the poppy fields and the fragile dawn of a new day, built on peace, justice, and genuine opportunity.